everyone, welcome to Views on News. I'm Jawad Tehami. After the Taliban took over Kabul, post-international troops withdrawal, there has been a resurgence of terror attacks in Pakistan, with Pakistani authorities repeatedly conveying to the Afghan Taliban that they had an obligation under the Doha peace agreement, the promise they made with the international community that they would ensure that the Afghan soil won't be allowed to be used against any other country. Also, Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari saying that banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan remains to be an absolute red line for Pakistan. We also saw a high-level delegation led by Defense Minister Khaja Mohammad Asif also visited Kabul to impress upon the Afghan authorities to take concrete measures against the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan with irrefutable evidence of its involvement in the recent terror activities in Pakistan. Also, we saw a number of National Security Committee meetings held, conveying a strong and loud and clear message to the Afghan authorities that they have got an obligation under the Doha peace deal, and also that no one would be allowed to challenge the writ of the state. Most recently, we have seen Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, during his address at the SCO Summit of Heads of State, also urged the Afghan authorities to take concrete measures to stop any entity from using Afghan soil for terrorism. Earlier, we had seen that NECTA had said the negotiations with the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan emboldened this proscribed organization and gave it space to regroup and launch attacks once again against Pakistan. Also, we have seen there have been reports of internal divisions not only in the ranks of the Afghan Taliban but also the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, Afghan Taliban had been denying the presence of banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, but there is a development that speaks contrary to that. We'll be including that one also into the program. We have also seen recently United Nations Security Council sanctions monitoring team's report that was released that said Afghan Taliban and the proscribed groups including Al-Qaeda and the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan have got the strong and symbiotic relationship. The report, however, was rejected by the Afghan Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid. Now, in major news, Pakistan's Special Representative to Afghanistan, Mr. Asif Durrani, has said, let me quote, that Afghanistan's interim rulers recently initiated certain steps to address Pakistan as well as neighbors, including China's cross-border terror concerns, unquote. We'll be taking this important issue up for discussion. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Nasir Khan, former ambassador. Mr. Khan, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Also, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Tughral Yamin. He is senior analyst. Dr. Yamin, thank you for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Mr. Ambassador. Ambassador Asif Durrani talked in an interview, and he has said there are certain steps which are initiated by the Afghan authorities to address the concerns of Pakistan. Most primarily, it talks about the relocation of the TTP members away from the Pak-Afghan border. How do you see that development?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the most important player in this whole game is the Afghan government itself. And although Ambassador Durrani has said that there are some encouraging signs, if you look at the attack in January on the police in KP, there were more than 100 people killed. And it seems that the Afghan Foreign Minister's response was that like a warning to Pakistan that we should not start pointing fingers and we should not start to create more enemies. That kind of statement certainly does not help. Apart from that, the Afghan Taliban leader, Mr. Haibatullah Akhundzada, has also given a statement which says that the state of Pakistan is not really an Islamic system, which again tries to justify a sort of struggle against this present form of government. So that is again something I find discouraging in a sense. Now, what is it that we ought to do? I think there are many ways in which we can put pressure on the Afghan government, and we ought to continue to do that, not least of which is the transit trade. And apart from that, we must give them a warning that this is proving to be an existential threat to our country, and we will not tolerate this. If you remember last year, there was an attack, an air attack in Afghan territory in chasing these insurgents. So, you know, we have to be very, very strict. We have to realize that they cannot play this kind of double game. We can see signs where they are trying to create a situation where there may be a strategic depth into Pakistan by having this force of insurgents. What is it that they want to do? Basically, they want to have territory mainly in the FATA areas. So this is something we need to deal with very, very strictly, and we need to make them aware that this is an existential threat to our country, and under no circumstances are we going to tolerate this.
Right, Mr. Khan, the statement that you just referred to of Hibatullah Khunzada regarding the form of the government here in Pakistan. Despite Pakistani authorities facilitating the Afghan peace and reconciliation process?
Absolutely. That is why I'm so disappointed, because you know, some of the signals right at the beginning that were coming out, irrespective of what they committed to in the Doha Accords, even when the government was formed, in our talks with the Afghan Taliban, they were saying that we will make sure that there are no non-state actors, there are no players within our territory that can harm any of our neighbors. So we must hold them to these statements.
Right, Dr. Yamin, what's your understanding of this particular development? There was expression of desire from the Afghan Taliban that they would be relocating the members of Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan away from Pakistan-Afghanistan border, which Ambassador Durrani, Pakistan's Special Representative to Afghanistan, says if it is actually carried out, we'll be welcoming it. Do you think that particular thing is going to be sufficient to secure peace along the Pak-Afghan border?
I think peace can only be secured when the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is totally defanged. It is quite strange when they say they'll be moving them away from the international borders. That means that they were actually deployed there and they were making forays into Pakistan. So one, it is an admission of guilt, some kind of a mea culpa.
So that is pretty much in contradiction with the earlier statements also.
Statements that we do not have them,
yes.
There's no footprint. But how far deep into Afghanistan would they be taking them to? Would they be sharing the grid references with us? Their exact locations, I do not know. Actually, there should be no Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan inside Afghanistan, particularly when they are opposed to the government of Pakistan, when they are carrying out activities within Pakistan. And as today's report in one of the newspapers goes to say that May 2023 has been one of the deadliest months insofar as attacks inside Pakistani territories is concerned. So and you have already mentioned in your opening remarks that Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has said that Taliban are our absolute red line, and that is absolutely correct. That should be our red line. Taliban in any form should not be accepted. The Pakistani edition of it should not be accepted because they are against our government. So they should not be accepted. The Afghan government should share intelligence with us. Where are they exactly located? What are they doing? And if they are doing this with their explicit permission or not. So this is something that should not happen if you're two friendly neighbors, and we expect the Taliban to be friendly neighbors because we have always been accommodative to their stance, and we have earned the ire of the entire world because of that in their first edition and as well as in their second edition also. So we would like them to share intelligence about the Taliban, and there should be a time period in which they should actually disarm them, and if possible they should be returned to us. They should be, because they are after all Pakistani citizens, they are not Afghan citizens. So they should be a proper demobilization and reintegration program in which they should be reintegrated as Pakistani citizens and should not reside in Afghanistan as hostile elements. Doha Accord notwithstanding, the promises given there notwithstanding, this is something which is of danger to us, and as Ambassador Saab very correctly pointed out, this is an existential threat that we should not tolerate under any circumstances.
Right, Ambassador Khan, when we talk about this particular desire of the Afghan Taliban trying to disarm them by relocating them away from the international border, what does that depict? A clear contradiction in earlier statements that they were saying that there is no presence of Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan on the Afghan soil.
Yes, so as it was mentioned, this is basically an admission that there are Afghan Taliban that reside in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, but you know, as far as bringing them back and integrating them back into our society is concerned, that is a rather complicated situation. Way back in, I think, the end of 2021.
This has already been tried.
Not only that, their families have already been moved back to these areas. So this is something very important to consider. But once there was also talk that maybe these people could come back and go back to their respective tribes. Some of the tribal leaders even accepted this, provided that they would be unarmed before they came back. However, there are people who have been victims in these very areas. The victims of the TTP will ask for some kind of punishment for them. So I also hear talk sometimes of the Loya Jirga. Now, if there's a Loya Jirga, I'm absolutely sure that the victims will turn up there and they will present their case and they will say, why aren't these people being punished? And the Loya Jirga will have no other choice but to punish them. So it's a rather complicated situation. It's not easy. At the same time, there are reports of them expanding and getting better organized and things like that. So these are things we need to tackle. The important difference this time round, for example, you must have heard of armed groups going into Swat. Immediately they faced a lot of resistance from the locals. So the important difference this time round is that the people have experienced this before, and now they are determined themselves to stand up against these people.
Right, Dr. Yamin, your take regarding this reintegration of those members of Band Tehrik-e-Taliban in Pakistan. You are of the view that they should be disarmed first, and then, but that has already been tried, and that actually blew in our face, and they were emboldened as per the Nectar's briefing.
It has not been tried. We had said that we are going to pardon them. I do not agree with it, and as Ambassador Khan is absolutely correct in saying, they should be punished for their wrongdoings. If they have killed somebody, they should be tried in a court of law. But when I say that they should be brought back to Pakistan, is that they should be properly inventoried. You should know who these people are. Their case files should be built up, and if there is anybody who in his or her misjudgment joined wrong forces, then we should try to wean them away from violent ideologies, virulent ideologies, and we should know where they are. The reintegration is not, as he is absolutely correct in saying, it's not an easy process. It's a very long process, and you have to be very patient, you have to re-indoctrinate them, but there is a proper DDR process which is recognized by the United Nations. So I'm not saying that they should be pardoned. They should be tried if they are found guilty, and their victims should not be complaining that these people have been let free, not at all. And they should be tried and they should be punished if they have done so. But if they remain in Afghanistan, then they are at large. You cannot do anything about them. I'm talking in that. They should be properly extradited. They should be properly disarmed. They should be properly, there should be proper databases for them. There should be proper arrangement for them getting skill sets which can make them proper citizens of the country, not wild people with guns or without guns. They can do anything that they want, because if you let them loose, they can remain criminals forever. Their children will also become criminals. So this process should be done in the long term. The government should pay attention to it. The same way as we say that Afghan refugees should go back. Similarly, we should say that these are our people and we want them formally extradited. and punished if we want to. So that is how you can actually control these people. Otherwise, they're going to remain in Afghanistan.
Right, Ambassador Khan, we recently saw the United Nations Security Council Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team also released a report which says that the link between Al-Qaeda, the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban is strong and symbiotic, as well as that the Afghan Taliban don't consider banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan a threat for Afghanistan. In that sort of a scenario, with this particular development, do you think the sincerity of intention of the Afghan Taliban should be believed?
No, I don't believe it. I can see the sort of policy that they are trying to conduct. You see, the TTP and the Afghan Taliban have very old links, and the TTP as well as the Afghan Taliban consists of many splinter groups. So the dynamics are really quite complicated. But at the end of the day, the Afghan Taliban, and not only the Afghan Taliban, even the non-Taliban population of Afghanistan has a sympathy for the TTP simply because of their hatred towards Pakistan, a country which has given refuge to more than 4 million refugees. And to this day, we have at least 2 million refugees. In the last 30 years, they must have had children, so that must have multiplied. We don't even have the right figures, right? And yet, for some reason, they have an abiding hatred for the state of Pakistan. So there is support for the TTP amongst the local population there as well. But the leader, Nur Wali Masood, has done a bayat. He has pledged allegiance to the leader of the Afghan Taliban. And similarly, they have also pledged allegiance to the Islamic Emirate itself. And this is something that suits the Afghan Taliban very well. Now, we need to face them with the facts, and we need to make it very, very clear that there is no way that Pakistan will be able to tolerate this.
So don't you think this particular policy by the Afghan Taliban is going to push them more into international isolation, especially when Afghanistan is faced with humanitarian and economic crisis?
Absolutely, there is no doubt in my mind. I fail to understand how they see the future of their people and their government if they are not willing to cooperate with their neighbors, because this is something that affects not only Pakistan. China is concerned about this, the Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all these countries are concerned. So the Afghan Taliban need to show a very, very responsible attitude towards such non-state actors. If they want to be part of the international community, they cannot live in isolation. I gave you an example. If we stop their transit trade, they could be in a lot of trouble. They would not have food to eat, because most of the food goes from here. So they have to be very careful, and they have to consider the pitfalls in a policy such as this.
Right, Dr. Yamin, your understanding, we've seen recently they have taken some concrete action against IS Khorasan. Why not similar sort of action against the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan on the Afghan soil? What sort of affairs do you think are associated when we talk about the Afghan Taliban's perspective?
You see, the Islamic State in Khorasan is not Afghan. They are people from outside Afghanistan, and they do not have any historic links with the Afghan Taliban. But the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistani Taliban have historic links through Madrasa Haqqaniya. So they've gone to the same madrasas. The Islamic Emirate and Afghanistan considers IS to a very large extent as a threat to them, and not the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. So this is something that we should be very careful about. And when we talk at various forums that Afghanistan should be given recognition subject to a number of conditions. For example, they should stop their misogynist policies. They should allow females to work and allow them to go to schools and colleges, and that they should have an inclusive government. We should also include this particular point, that they should disarm the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan who are residing in Afghanistan, and make sure that they do not attack inside our territory. This should, as the young Mr. says, should be our red line. We should not tolerate it. And we should say it again and again and again to all the Afghan dignitaries who come to Pakistan. Their acting foreign minister was here some time back. I'm sure the Foreign Office must have told them in so many words, but it should be repeated again and again and again. Even if they do not like it, we should tell them that this hurts and we are not going to accept it.
Right, point taken. We are honored to be joined by another participant in the show. On the phone line, Mr. Iftikhar Firdous, senior journalist associated with Khorasan Diary. Mr. Firdous, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Now, there is a development. Pakistan Special Representative to Afghanistan, Ambassador Asif Durrani, says that Afghan Taliban have initiated certain steps to address the concerns of Pakistan as well as other neighbors, including China, and most primarily when it comes to relocating the TTP members away from the Pak-Afghan border. What's your understanding of this development?
So Ambassador is in a position where he can actually comment on, some of the activities that the Taliban have undertaken, looking at the geo-economic and strategic objectives involved in this entire procedure. But the fact that the TTP has still managed to carry out attacks inside Pakistan is definitely a concern. While our ambassador is actually talking about cooperation and the way that the Taliban have stifled the TTP, also the fact that the movement from the border is something that was expected for the past couple of weeks. But despite the fact that an agreement was made, we have still not seen any physical movement of militant groups from the border so far. But the ambassador, as I said, is at liberty of saying that because he is at a responsible position. On ground, the situation definitely varies. And the way that we look at it currently, we see an increase in attacks by the TTP, particularly in the realm of target killings as well as targeting security forces, tribal elders, and most probably the police itself.
Right, Mr. Firdous, so when we talk about the Afghan Taliban's perspective, what are their fears associated when it comes to them taking a concrete action against the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is operating from the Afghan soil?
There are actually a few of them. Number one is understanding the Afghan Taliban and the position that they have taken. Firstly, the spiritual hierarchy of decision making. We know that the Afghan Taliban, Al-Qaeda, TTP, all of them owe allegiance to them, as well as several other militant factions within the Afghanistan-Pakistan region and the wider world as well. Secondly, we see the growth of the Islamic State of Khorasan, and if there is any particular action that's taken against TTP, one of the fears of the Afghan Taliban is that they don't want any more infighting on their soil, and that is why they actually would avoid taking any stern action, and that's why they've always stressed about diplomatic channels of communication, so that there is no diversion for the TTP and they actually do not flip sides and join the Islamic State of Khorasan, which has already become a nuisance for the Taliban despite several actions taken against that particular group. And lastly, I think it's just the dynamics of the group, because we've seen even previously in the late 2013s and the beginning of 2014, when the Afghan Taliban was literally crunched by the Afghan National Army as well as the US forces, it was the TTP that actually came to their rescue. So obviously, that particular part where there is an unannounced agreement that if there is ever such time where the TTP is faced with a similar situation, the Afghan Taliban would also come to help. So generally, I mean, you can consider these three particular premises as laying the foundation of that relationship. But of course, I mean, there are things that also go beyond that as well.
Right. You mentioned three very important points: the spiritual hierarchy. When you talk about the second one, the IS Khorasan threat to the Afghan Taliban, and you're of the view that if the Afghan Taliban take a concrete action against the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, they fear that they are going to join hands with IS Khorasan, as far as I understand your view. And the third one, that they fought together. Now, when we talk about the threat from IS Khorasan, is it a bigger threat as compared to the threat if the Afghan Taliban are not fulfilling their promise and the kind of threat they might be having from a well-stable government over a certain nation state?
I think one of the biggest issues, if you look at it from this perspective, for the Afghan Taliban would be actually to sustain a government. And that's why they would avoid any sort of infighting. They've even tried to downplay the problem of the Islamic State of Khorasan. And initially, when they were asked, they said they did not more than a headache. And then we saw a series of bombings in Afghanistan that actually targeted governors and deputy governors and managed to infiltrate the ranks of the Afghan Taliban. Then they sort of went out ahead and carried out multiple intelligence-based operations by the GDI, and we've seen them tightening the news against the Islamic State of Khorasan. But those attacks have still continued. I think one of the biggest apprehensions for the Afghan Taliban is actually the TTP becomes the test case for them. And you've seen multiple times the Afghan Taliban saying that there is no TTP in Afghanistan. They're operating from Pakistan soil because that provides them the legitimacy to say that this is Pakistan's internal problem and not Afghanistan's problem. But if you look at the wider counter-terrorism cooperation and the way the world views it, if TTP actually, grows out of proportion and it sort of becomes a major threat to Pakistan as well as its assets, I think that one of the biggest issues would be that whether the Afghan Taliban counter-terrorism prospects, the way that it was agreed on in the Doha negotiations, whether that would actually be something fruitful or not. And lastly, whether the nation states would actually take the Afghan Taliban and consider them a legitimized government. That is one of the major things that actually they would be looking for. So I think one of the reasons that they've actually led a closed eye towards actions against the TTP on Afghan soil. We've seen several Afghan TTP commanders killed, but a little reaction from the Afghan Taliban. Probably they cannot do it themselves, but they're probably open to some sort of counter-terrorism measures against them, which could be clandestine.
The third point that you already mentioned, that both the Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan and Afghan Taliban fought together. That is what would be considered as a favor that was given by Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan to the Afghan Taliban in their fight. Right. So, what about the favors of Pakistani authorities? Pakistani authorities had always been designing for a peaceful and a stable Afghanistan, and they'd been facilitating the Afghan peace and reconciliation process. Also, we saw the result of which in the Doha peace deal. Also, Pakistan had also been advocating the kind of dire humanitarian crisis and the economic crisis Afghanistan is faced with on all international fora. So where ideally that reciprocation from Afghan Taliban should be going? Towards the Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan who fought with it, or the country you had been facilitating throughout the Afghan peace and reconciliation process?
In my opinion, it's actually a double-edged sword because the more palatable Afghan Taliban become towards Pakistan, they're still not a popular government in Afghanistan. They're still not a popular government in Afghanistan, and they are looking towards legitimacy from the common man himself. And that is why if they actually, start taking some sort of dictates from Pakistan, or even if it's not dictates, there is some sort of friendly offering, there is resistance from within the Afghans and the Afghan Taliban itself, who actually want to break the image that they are in some sort of collusion with Pakistan. And that is why I think it's very important that they maintain their position in terms of neutrality so that they can be a solution to this problem based on some kind of understanding with Pakistan. And I think the middle ground for that was to actually relocate the Taliban from the border, the initial prospects being those of the peace talks. But as far as my information is concerned, that relocation process has still not begun. Regardless of all of that, I think that they are in a catch-22 position right now, and so the stakes are pretty high. It would be very soon that Pakistan would be demanding some kind of action.
Right, Mr. Iftikhar, Firdous, one last question. I have that very report that has been published today in a leading media outlet that has been authored by you. It talks about the media offensive of the Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. You've also highlighted a couple of strategies they have already adopted. Now, given those, we've got a very detailed version of those strategies they have already adopted. How those should be countered? What are your suggestions?
I think one of the basic things that Pakistan lacked till 2014, although by 2012 Pakistan had developed a counter-terrorism strategy, it did not have a counter-extremism or a counter-narrative to terrorism. The only way that we actually dealt with terrorism in Pakistan was that we created an otherness, saying that the TTP were proxies for someone else and they were not people from this land and working against the government. And then we saw this entire process of peace negotiation where we actually tried to bring them back. I think the state needs to come out here. There needs to be clarity. There was a national action plan that was drafted. The NACTA has an entire division which actually deals with counter narratives, but we haven't seen any substantial amount of material that has been sort of created or proposed or on the media which actually addresses this issue. I think to create counter narratives, you need smart people and it needs to be more generic rather than just being state owned or with particular logos coming in from certain departments saying that these are public service messages. I think the age of social media has transformed everything. And there is little factual inaccuracy if I say that the militant sphere has actually capitalized that space better than the state so far.
Mr. Iftikhar Firdous, a senior journalist associated with the Khorasan Diary, thank you very much for joining in at Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Ambassador Khan, the media offensive, the kind of narrative now the Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is trying to build.
Yes, this is a very important point that you've brought up, because you see, as far as their numbers are concerned, the estimates range from about 5,000 to about 35,000 people. But their main strength would be to carry out spectacular attacks and be, have this whole thing splashed all over the media. So the first thing we need to do is, just like we ban certain personalities from our media, we ought to ban their name, especially after any such attack. We can deal with those attacks the way we see fit, but we should not allow the media to mention this name, because this clearly shows they're trying to win hearts and minds somewhere. They're trying to create an image of themselves which is far larger than it really is. So they will be targeting people who are disgruntled, disillusioned, unhappy, unemployed, and that is where they will find more recruits. If you notice, they have now gone into the non-Pashtun areas of Balochistan. Earlier it was Zob and these areas. Now they have gone into Kalat and they've gone into Makran. They've gone into several areas where there is some kind of dissent or some kind of disgruntlement against the state, to be able to recruit more people. But for example, when you talk about their media initiative, it's not just electronic, even their print media has increased. Now the question is, are we going to counter this with a counter narrative, right? What is it that they are trying to promote, and where does it not click with the public itself? Because you see, if you look at the Pakistani public, when you talk about views that are intolerant or fundamentalist, as far as elections are concerned, these views are not popular, as you can see by the performance of certain religious parties in Pakistan. So we can counter that narrative, but you can see from this media push that they are very keen to send their message out. We need to not only counter that, but whenever there are certain actions that are spectacular, that would shock people, that would scare people, we should have a total blackout in the media about it. And I think that will go a long way.
There was pretty much part of that National Action Plan also that asked for no glorification of such type of acts.
Well, you know, the incident that we had in KP with the police, more than 100 people lost their lives. It was splashed all over. You see, we should have had a ban on that. So in future at least, we should make sure that we don't mention these people, that certain elements, they may be half sitting on the fence or maybe half sympathizing with them, would be actually attracted to their cause.
Right. Dr. Yamin, your understanding of their media push, media offensive, and they're not only talking about their version of jihad in those in that particular content. They're also trying to discuss the socio-economic issues Pakistan is faced with, and also criticizing the institutions.
I think we should attack where it hurts them, and their strength lies in their rank and file, in their cadres, whether they are 5,000 or 35,000, they're foot soldiers. So we should actually target them, and the narrative that we should build up, and that should be in their native tongues, Pashto or whatever they speak. Most of them speak Pashto. Maybe some of them speak Persian or some other language. If they are active in Balochistan, then some of them might be speaking some Balochi language also. But you should hit them there. You should tell them that their cause is doomed. They have no chance in hell to actually occupy any part of Pakistan, that their children are going to suffer and their future generations are going to suffer. And they should, we should create scenarios in which they should understand that they have no future. So if we have a proper narrative, if we are broadcasting through FM radios, that is one very effective way of having them tune in and listen to us, or if there's internet coverage in those areas, then there should be social media platforms also which should be used, which should tell them that they have no future. So far we are not doing that. One, we should exactly know how many people are there. I understand there are about a dozen.
Why it makes it lucrative for them to take up arms and go for the non-state activities rather than becoming the part of the mainstream and contribute in the society in the normal, regular way?
It's easy. You see, it's easy. Why do beggars ask for arms on the streets? It's easy. They don't have to work. So if you put a gun in their hand and make somebody a commander and give him an SUV and give him a satellite telephone, he feels very important. If you make them work, it's difficult. Work is difficult. But if you are a criminal, or if you are a person who can terrorize people, who can create chaos in the society, then there's no stopping him. You can only make him realize that his activities are going to not only hurt him, it is going to hurt his entire family and his entire generation. He is going to remain there in some outback in Afghanistan, continue to live in a mud hut or whatever, continue to fight, and he is going to die in his 30s or in his 40s. So what we should do is have a narrative which should tell them, hey there, this is not going to lead you anywhere. This is a disaster for you and your coming generations. So it's better to lay down your arms and come over. And we are going to give you skill sets which can make you a good member of the society.
The fact that you've just mentioned, it is easier for them to do that.
It's not easy.
So they are they going to buy that narrative?
See, the foot soldier can do that. The commander may not, because commander has authority, you see. But if there is a group of say 1,000 people, there will be one commander, the battalion commander or brigade commander or division commander. He will not agree to you, because if you ask him to give up his fiefdom, he's not going to accept it. But you can create doubts in the minds of the foot soldiers very easily. Look, here son, what you have done is wrong. Come back, your parents are waiting for you. Come back, they have a job for you, or they have a bride waiting for you, things of that sort. You've still not committed anything which is wrong. So these are the people which can be weaned away, still weaned away, who are still young and who know and who might have seen hardships in wherever they're living. I'm sure that life must not be easy in Afghanistan. They must be living very primitively. So if we can tell them that we can equip you with modern technologies or modern ideas or modern thoughts, and you have a future in Pakistan, come back and we'll help you. Something of that sort. We haven't done it so far. Hit them in the front lines.
For that, it is imperative to have a contact with them. And
Yeah,
through
you
what
see-
means do you suggest that a contact could be established?
The intelligence always has contacts. They always have moles inside all hostile agencies. No intelligence agency worth its name does not reach out to these people. It doesn't mean that you're going to pardon them, no, but you can have moles inside them. It has been done since times immemorial.
There are already reports of internal divisions within the ranks of Band Tehrik-e-Taliban.
Yeah, yes, that's good if they are. You must increase this gulf, these chasms which already exist. Break them within their ranks. The battalions or brigades or whatever should break up from within. They should rise up and tell their commanders, hey, this is not for us. There's no future in it for us. Things of that sort. So it has to be very glib. It has to be very something which could attract a simple mind. It should not be couched in very fancy words. Just simple words. Son, come back. Son, come back. You have no future over there. Things of that sort.
So Ambassador Khan, what about the role of religious scholars and the ulama in order to bring all those people back, which Dr. Tughral Yamin has just mentioned, that could be weaned away and could be brought back into the mainstream?
Yes, that's a great idea. But you see, you have to, within the tribal areas, you have to reach out to the tribal elders. And these tribal elders, in turn, will reach out to the population, and especially the youth at large. The main people that they recruit are younger people. So tribal elders can play a part in the FATA area, the Sardars in Balochistan and all. Frankly, I don't believe yet there is a serious problem as far as the TTP's connection with the Baloch is concerned. But there is a lot of resentment and a lot of disgruntlement within Balochistan for many, many years now. So this is a very, I mean, it's easier said than done. Many governments have been trying this. But we need to reach out to these people, first of all, to determine what their complaint against the state is, and secondly, to have special development projects which will provide opportunities to these youths, because it's poverty, it's deprivation that creates recruits. When they have no hope left, when there's frustration, then they look towards any alternative. And as was mentioned, these people provide you with food and shelter and arms and respect and opportunity. You know, when you talk about a bride, they're talking about 70 brides, you know. So this is the sort of thing that needs to be countered.
There comes the role of ulama and religious scholars.
Absolutely, because every Friday,
their version of what they think is the truth.
Absolutely, because when people are being misled in the name of religion, from the pulpits of the mosques, if there is a different, more moderate and more reasonable narrative, I'm sure that people would like to live in peace. Nobody likes to be up in the mountains and fighting and risking their lives all the time. There may be a momentary thing, but there are huge tribes in Balochistan controlled by the Sardars. They have to also, first of all, we have to engage with those Sardars. If there are genuine concerns they have or genuine complaints they have against the state, that ought to be addressed so that they are on our side. And they in turn can go and talk to their people.
Right. Dr. Yamin, one last very important thing. When it comes to integration of Afghanistan into CPAC, the offer that has been made by both the sides, China and Pakistan also, do you think the Afghan Taliban see dividends associated with it, which are very lucrative?
I think they do. Amir Khan Muttaqi was here, their acting foreign minister, and I'm sure these things must have been discussed with him. There are dividends for Afghans in connecting with CPEC. It will make markets accessible to them, and if we have the special economic zones coming up, the Afghan, if there's some Afghan entrepreneur, he can be asked to, or she can be asked to.
But
make
Mr.
some
Amir
kind
Khan
of
Muttaqi was also reiterating his stance of negotiating with the Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan to the Pakistani authorities during his recent visit. What about that? I mean,
yeah, I know that they have their own version, they have their own stance, but the mere fact that he came to you means that he wants you to do something, and you've been pleading their case at all forums. You want their monies which have been frozen by the US to be released. You want them to be recognized. So they know in their hearts of hearts that it's only perhaps Pakistan who's pleading the case, nobody else. Nobody in the Gulf is worried about them. Maybe. Qatar might be interested or Turkey, but it's only Pakistan which is helping them. They know it.
Dr. Tughral, Yamin, Senior Analyst, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Nasir Khan, former ambassador, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.